contact!
How deep can you plunge into the darkness?
Through the dark veil of space, time.
I wish we could have joined you sooner.
This is Warp Chatter.
Time is short. There is much to be done.
The wait ends now.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, to the Warp Chatter podcast, the podcast dedicated to talking about the Horus Heresy Legion's digital card game, Horus Heresy lore, Warhammer 40,000, everything that encompasses. I am your host, Scuff D, and this is a podcast by players for players. We're going to be talking with two players of the Team USA in the World Cup, which just happens to be myself and Virgil of the 13th.
Hello, good to be here.
Hello, welcome, fellow Team USA. We've also got with us the crab co-host, as always, Axel Manning.
Howdy, howdy, ho.
And
still here.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking World Cup today. That's going to be the main topic of discussion. But before we get to that, just a quick update clarification. If I sound a little different, under the weather, it turns out because I am, or I was. I think when we were recording the podcast last week, I thought, it's just a change in medication. I've got a little tickle in my throat. It turned out that I had COVID, and it's been a week now, and I'm getting better, but I still have got some junk and some general stuff. But it knocked me out for a bit, so I had to get over that. So that's what you're hearing. So if I end up coughing and I can't tweak it out, or sneezing, blow my nose, whatever the case may be, hopefully we'll keep that short and brief, and I can edit what I can edit. But I just want to lay that out there. So with that said and done, like I said, we're going to be talking about World Cup. So far, we are almost done with the group stage. This is actually, Virgil, you are, despite me putting out this invite in the tournament bracket, major announcement for all the teams back when the qualifiers were still running, you are actually the first World Cup guest to make it on the stage. I think we've got the next couple of weeks, we're going to have some other World Cup teams join us, which is great. It just took a while for people to realize that, this was a thing. So
technicality, LCFR was on before.
That's true. I mean, we did discuss the World Cup, and he was there representing as captain of Team Canada, so that is true.
I would say it's only by technicality, though.
But technically, yes. But technically, we didn't have the team, or we didn't have the World Cup to discuss because we were just getting ready to kick it off. We were making predictions at that time and talking about the format. And now, by the time you guys are hearing this, the group stage should be wrapped up, and any lingering doubts as far as who's going to progress to top 8 should be resolved. We're going to talk a little bit about that at length, as well as the journey, the games, the format, just in general, good stuff. But before we get to that, I want to do player introductions. Virgil, tell us about yourself.
All right. Well, for starters, and as you've already introduced me, I'm Virgil of the 13th. I've been a member of the Masterclass Lodge family for a while now, almost 2 years. I've been a player for a little over 2 years so far, and to this date, entirely free to play. Haven't bought or paid for anything, just been playing to unlock my cards. I try to frequent the top 50. You may see me every now and then. Only go for the top 10 a couple of times. Favorite lodge, or favorite legion, rather, and you may be able to tell from my username, but is, of course, the Ultramarines. Only been able to play them on ladder for a handful of times. Their time in the sun has been limited, unlike their time on the tabletop sun.
You can find that mission, but it can work.
That mission does work. Very hard with Gauge, and for listeners that are at low Terra or Mars, you can make it work very easily with Gilliman as well. But good to be here, and that's a little bit about me.
All right.
I forgot we share a lodge family.
It's a large family.
It is 200 of us, so yeah. I don't always run into everyone. And most people don't recognize me because of my username.
Yeah, when you're in the big families, you kind of forget, unless you are literally playing side by side with somebody, or see them right above or in your 20. But yeah, when you're in the communities that have got multiple launch groups, sometimes you don't realize it. You've been there for so long.
Yeah. Another problem is the user Weiss, who is also in World Cup, decided to rename me several times, and other users were having a rename war with my username. So a lot of people don't recognize me on the nicknames that I randomly have.
See, that's why I just keep one name on the Discords if I can help it, just to keep it simple.
In this case, I couldn't. I didn't have a choice.
So Virgil, how'd you get into Legions? I know you've been playing for a couple of years. How'd you find it? How'd you come across it?
Well, I've been into tabletop for a little while, since 7th edition. I got into it about high school. And, of course, my good buddy that I play tabletop with at the local GW, he introduced me to the card game when it was still relatively new. I believe at the time the event that was live was the introduction of the Space Wolves and the Thousand Suns.
Oh, okay.
So I started playing about then, unlocking cards as I could. Of course, it's a very slow process when you're free to play, but time and commitment does reward you. And yeah, I've always been into card games, more so than tabletop. And of course, I love the universe, so it was an easy fit.
All right. Well, kind of leading it through from somebody who's played, and obviously I have the introduction through the tabletop. I was talking to a player, I think last night at the Bar Night Legions. I think it's where it came up, or it came up before Bar Night Legions, actually. Which is why we always kind of ask like players like how they got into the game or how they came across the game. A lot of people came across it just by randomly or somebody linked them to it. Very few like actively sought it out, but nobody really has said that they saw advertisements for it and they're like, oh, I'm going to check that out. And I think that's been a general gripe of mine, question I've raised in a few Q&As occasionally. Is like, the advertising for this game is as good as the game is. And I know people have got complaints about balance or whatnot, but realistically, it's a solid card game. It does a great job representing the lore in the universe, and it's probably one of the best Warhammer, 30,000 games, 40,000 games even, that's out there. And sadly, it has like the weakest advertising, and it's been around for over 4 years now, and it just always boggles my mind. Like, I'd like to hear one day somebody say, yeah, I saw an ad on YouTube, or I saw an ad in the White Dwarf, or whatever it was. Like, that's how you get people interest too. You got to advertise the game.
I would agree.
Maybe people learn that.
Well, let's hope that they learn it with Warpforge. Yeah, they got a cash cow waiting, but also, it would be a shame if they just repeat the same mistakes.
To be fair, though, when their anniversary thing came out, there was a lot of advertising.
I feel like that was the only time, really, when the advertisements finally were visible. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll agree. It wasn't perfect, but
no, it was
I like to see some.
Yeah. It was something. I think they could do better, but you know what? Also, I don't know how much that costs. Like, maybe they just don't have the budget for that. Maybe they should make a budget for that. I don't know. Maybe that should be part of their contract with GW. Is just like, hey, how about we get a free half-page spread in your magazine every month? That people still pay to read.
HHL on centerfold.
So get that spread out on the monthly calendar. Like, who's the Primarch of the month?
That's already been made. That's just the rule of the internet. That already exists.
It already exists. You just don't know it. The Firehouse calendar.
You shouldn't Google it, but if you do,
Mr. February. Look at that.
Curiously, and in the same vein, despite it being something that Everguild is working on, I've seen very few ads for their upcoming 40K version of the card game either.
Yeah, to be fair, they don't even tell us what's happening in it, so they should be teasing us. They should show us preview images.
That would be nice, yeah.
Something to build the hype.
They had the 1 week, right, when they announced all the Warhammer games. It was Skulls Week or whatever it was. That was, whoa, it's there. And I haven't heard anything else from it since.
Everyone's like, oh, that's awesome. So when's it coming out? And then they're like, the 2023. And everyone's like, oh, I have a ton of questions. And then they disappeared.
Yeah, they're like, save those for next year. When we get to that, you can ask your questions. Any screenshots? Nope, just what you saw. That's it. It's going to look pretty mysterious.
It's going to be a game.
It'll be a game, and there'll be 40,000. There'll be Xenos in it, so there is that.
That'll be really interesting.
Now,
them adding Xenos is enough reason to get
the community manager did say during the Q&A that it's not going to be a reskin, and that has been my biggest question, concern. I think I even said during the Q&A, it's like, I don't want a reskin. I know this game is fun. I really enjoy Horus Heresy Legions a lot. And if you gave me a reskin of the same game, I would say I already have that game, and it's actually more complete. I'm going to keep playing this game. So if you make a different game, different features, different cards, different deck design, whatever the mold is, I think that would be an improvement and an opportunity for them to basically, even if it's, technically Legions 2.0 or 3.0, however you want to, paraphrase it. If it's not the same though, then that's the best. Like if it comes out and it's just literally like, well, it turns out that the Astartes are like the Sons of Horus, and the Orcs are like the World Eaters, and
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I go back and I'll just play Legions and do that.
I don't know if he said it in there, but I don't remember. Would he have called Drakenlord a reskin? Because it just was. Like HHL is just a reskin of Drakenlord.
Yeah, I don't know if he would have. I don't know if he played Drakenlord, but I think a lot of people who are aware that was like EG's first draft, basically, of this game. It's very much a reskin. I don't know if he would call it that though.
Because that's what I'm going to base my opinion purely on. Because if they're not calling that a reskin, when it painfully is a reskin, then what's not a reskin with Warpforge?
Yeah.
I
don't know.
Well, we'll have to see.
What if
Only time
every
will tell, right?
warlord is like a knight, right? And they have like two sidearms?
I don't know if I'd be completely against that.
If it was a whole game like that. I don't think
I've seen a lot of people compare and talk about ideas for a game like that ever since Titans started coming out in Knights, where it might be interesting to have maybe a slower play style where the warlord is a lot more prominent and something like that.
I'd be okay with it. Like Titans, a lot of people have said it, and it's pretty true. They feel like sometimes they belong in a different mode or a different feature. If you had a game that played the way Titans play, and that's the game wrapped around that, and you have got a little bit more resource management or weapon management or whatever it is, I think that could be a really fun thing if it started out that way versus what we got, where Titans kind of got thrown in the mix along with everything else.
Mm-hmm. Could be an interesting way for them to more evenly represent factions within factions, since they have to bring Xenos to the table amongst, let's say, Necrons. There's going to be several different high and famous people that you want to see, but each of them has their own factions and their own differences. If you're going to bring Eldar, there's different craft worlds. If you're going to bring Space Marines, obviously there's different chapters. So everything's based around warlords more centrally. I think that might be a good way to show the traits and the differences between.
I also think, or rather feel, that they're going to split each faction into subgroups, because each one can be. Because the Eldar break into 3 subgroups, the Imperium break into like a dozen. Not really, but you get my point. Orcs, well, their subgroups, I guess, are clans, which Orcs are the ones that break up the least out of all of them, because at least the Tau break up into 2 nice groups.
Yeah, but Tau aren't going to be a launch. They're not a launch faction, so you never know what you're going to get with that.
Oh, are they not actually a launch? I didn't hear that part.
They are not. It's going
why
to be.
Why are they included in the server?
Why they're included in the server? Because why not? But they're not actually going to be a launch. It's going to be Imperium, Orcs, Eldar, Chaos, Necrons. Tau. If you look at the opening banner, there's no Tau there, baby.
And that would stand to make sense. The Tyranid and the Tau are the 2 newest large factions to the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
True.
And the Tyranid, honestly, would be a very solid expansion faction, I think.
Oh, yeah. That would be fun.
Have a big, good focus, right?
I feel like, though, they know people want Tyranids, so they put them base.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Which is funny, because there are Tau enjoyers. I like Tau. I like their Gundam aesthetic.
I visually,
it grew on
yes. I think that was the entire point from when they first kicked off. They just couldn't find a good way to squeeze them into the rest of the universe, so they did that whole Damocles Gulf thing. But I think as time has gone on, they've done better with the kind of merging it in, and their weapons are cool. I just don't know if the rules, sometimes really, that's all you do is shoot? Okay. I mean, I know they got a couple ways to deal with some hand-to-hand and hopefully blow it all away before it gets there, but that was they really were like the like the weakest shooty army. Like that's all we can do is shoot. Please don't hit us. Remember the was it the bonded, their equivalent of the veteran sergeant had like a bonding knife, and I was like, oh, he's got a close combat weapon. Like, no, that's just this gives him +1 to leadership. I'm like, wow. So it's just get in there. Like I had my first encounter with the Tau. Literally, they shot like 9 of my Marines dead. The veteran sergeant got in there and cleaned up all 10 of them, like on his own.
Yep. If you get in the melee, they're screwed. But their Overwatch is quite tough.
Yeah.
I really like them though with their representation and stuff like Dawn of War as well. I think that sold a lot of people.
Dawn of War did a great job.
Game.
Yeah.
There's even mods in Dawn of War 2 to add them back. So if you like playing them, they're still an option technically.
Well, there's no Tau in the World Cup. I'll tell you that.
Sadly.
It's been tooth and nail with a bunch of legions and a couple of neutral warlords, I think. But I don't think I played any neutral warlord. I played a Latara this week actually. But the World Cup, here we are. We are in week 4 of the group stage. For Team USA, we had a bye in week 1. So in our group, we're Group B. Basically, we've got games. We've had games against Italy, had games against Netherlands, Romania, and games against Ireland, Portugal this week. Next week, we'll end up playing Spain for the final leg of the journey. And obviously, for USA, for our team, we had a 16-man qualifier to get to the team. And I think that was was that 2 weeks? It felt like that was 2 weeks long.
That was 2 weeks long, yeah.
Yeah.
They gave us a little bit of time to coordinate, which was nice.
Which was good, yeah, because even though we had a lot of players, I mean, for the most part, with us all being in the U.S., that makes it a little bit easier for time zones. I will say the time zone issue in our group has been a bit of a pill. I think we're probably at the biggest odds with the time zones. Like when we played everybody, it's like 8 hours ahead. Like the best times to play them are in the middle of the day when we've got like a lunch break or something, and it's their evening because by the time we get off work, it's midnight or later for them.
Luckily, I've been matched up with a few night owls. I've been able to play with them while I get off of work. Lunches are hard to come by, but it's late, but not too late for them. They've been more than willing to be flexible, which I've appreciated from my opponents. Thank you if you're listening.
There you go. Yeah, I think being flexible is important. I don't think there's been too many standoffs. I think there's been a couple that's like, this is it. This is when I can play. And that's something I should probably do a little bit more often too. Is like, I cannot play any day but today. Tomorrow, this time. But we've had my performance the first couple of weeks. I was sadly disappointed. I did a better round this week, which is good because that helped us get the win over Ireland, Portugal. But it's been a pretty good competition. I think there's been a good mix of opponents, of warlords. The format, for those who weren't familiar, or who weren't paying attention when we did the World Cup discussion previously. So the format for each of these rounds is every team has got 3 players. All 3 players should play their games, and obviously when 2 players win their matches, then you've got to win for the round. Every player's got 4 warlords, and then prior to playing against their opponent, they submit a ban from their opponent's list that they don't want to see that warlord. So we've got 4, but by the time we square up, only 3 are what we're going to be playing, and we know what the ban is, and they know what their ban is, and we go from there. And every week, there has been the opportunity for players to change warlords on their teams if they wish. For the most part, I think collectively, most players haven't made any changes. Maybe 1 or 2 changes over the course of 4 weeks. With this being, is this your first group tournament, if I remember correctly? Is that right, Virgil?
At the very least, it's my first World Cup. I've been in a couple of the tournaments, but no, I don't believe any group tournaments to my memory, though. That could be failing.
Did you play Lodge Wars at all?
I want to say that I didn't, but it could be escaping my memory. So if I have, then it probably wasn't a memorable experience, and in which case I did badly.
Well, I mean, this is the first group tournament that this type of structure has been in there with regards to like the 4 warlords and the banning. I believe
a good system.
I'm sorry. I believe
I enjoy that system.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's got its pros and cons, but it's actually fairly good. I believe last year, opponents had 3 warlords, and they just had to win with 2 of the 3, and there was no banning in there. And then the very first World Cup, it was literally just 2 warlords. You pick your 2 warlords, and you've got to win with both of those. So it's kind of progressed and allowed a little bit more leeway. Gives you some room to have on the team. Technically, every team can't double up in the same faction. So even though there's 4 warlords per player, 12 different factions have got to be represented. So we can't share an Emperor's Children warlord or Imperial Fists. We've each got to pick our own faction and kind of strengthen down on it. And then you think you might have got a good pick. You go into the round, and your opponent bans that one warlord that you're really comfortable with, and now you've got to win with the other 3. I think it makes for some interesting matchups and some interesting thought too, because I know every time we get the announcements for who we're squaring up with, we get their warlord choices, we kind of have a discussion as far as, okay, what looks like a good ban, who should we ban here based off of who we're facing.
Yeah,
I think it makes for good. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say that makes sense, and I was basically gonna say what you say. It's good for strategy, and you got to plan.
Yeah, I agree with the both of you. I think that the 4 different factions and no overlap creates for a lot of good planning between the teams, which as a group-based tournament, I feel is important to represent teamwork as much as doing well on your own. Mm-hmm. I find that also banning one of the other warlords forces each individual player, as well as the team, like you said, discussing who to ban and why, but each individual player to really be ready to play with any of their 4 and to adapt their strategy, because whether they rely on a particular opener, say they like to open with Sigismund a lot because he's pretty good to tech around different archetypes of opponents, but then he gets banned. Suddenly you have to think on your feet and to decide who's quick enough, who's adaptable enough to open with.
Yeah. And that's just it. And you at the same time are hoping maybe when you are looking at the list to ban, like, okay, which warlord is going to give me the biggest problem? Like you can't overthink it, like and worry about what your opponent's going to ban. But like if you've got warlords that are rather faction that you're playing maybe is not a very board focused faction, and then you're going to worry about burn, and you're running into a burn or an aggro warlord, that might be the first pick that you're going to choose to ban and give yourself a little bit more breathing time versus like, hey, I'm a warlord and you've got 3 warlords that have got frontline. Okay, well, then I got to build around not getting past your front line or having ways to deal with it, or doing damage, coming up with a different strategy. You're not just going in blind. You've got an idea. And at the same time, if they don't ban your aggressive warlord, then they're probably going to double down on the front line. And I think for the most part, the games that I played, I would say that they haven't like done anything super crazy. There's been a couple of games where it's like, oh, I didn't expect that card, or I didn't expect them to open up with this warlord. But it's been
that double goldstones comes to mind.
Yes, that was the worst. Double goldstones. God, smart play. Can't hate him for it. And then just top decking those cards, or probably having them in at least 1 or 2 turns. But that can happen in a tournament. That's kind of nice. But there's not anything like crazy where like there's been major counters. And I think part of that is because you've got a little bit more room. Like if you were just playing a 2 warlord tournament, hey, I've got Korax and I've got Sevatar. Then your opponent is going to be like, okay, well, Informant Network's going in both of my decks. All the anti-stealth I can pack in is going in both of my decks. Any sort of stun tactic hate, sure, why not? Like, because they know they're going to run into both of those in both your decks. Where here it's like, okay, that might be viable for one, but I've got 2 other warlords, and you don't know which one I'm going to bring out right away. So that kind of allows for more, I want to say, balanced deck building for the most part. I mean, there's a couple cards where I'm like, yeah, this is still going to be a good card to include. Informant Network's never a bad choice, but especially if the group that I'm facing's got a stealth warlord, it's just going to go in. Like, but if they don't, then I can pass it up by. There's been a couple where it's like, instead of stealth, the main worry has been stun, or maybe a sabotage is more useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we've played we've played so far. Just talking about the group stage here, we've played Italy, we played Netherlands, Romania last week. We played Ireland, Portugal this week. Which week would you say so far was probably the toughest games that you've had?
I think the toughest as a team was certainly Italy. That's so far the 1 week we've lost. The U.S. has, which we kind of knew going in based on the players that was going to be a tough week. They're good players. Everyone has been good players, but especially we were more familiar with those guys, I would say, and that was probably the toughest week. We only ended up coming 1-2, so at least it wasn't an entirely lost week. But every match has been good. I feel really proud of the different players that have come to represent all of the countries out there, even the groups that have multiple countries. It's a good show. No poor sports, nobody who's quitting early, nobody who's just entirely out of their depth. So I think the qualifiers were good to have and certainly had the results that they were intended to.
Correct me if I'm wrong, didn't a member of UK quit early?
I have no idea.
To me, not to me.
UK is in... What group are they in? Are they in Group C? Group C. UK is in Group C, so I don't know. We haven't faced off against them. I'll be honest.
Okay. Yes, a member of UK did indeed leave.
Before we get into... I guess, really, I've really just been concerned with my group, with Group B, and our matches.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When we first started the tournament before the group stage kicked off, there was a time opportunity for the team captains to make votes as far as how we were going to do, what cards were going to be legal and not. And we talked about this when LCFR and TERS were on before the kickoff as far as what the bans were. And that's really about all that I've been involved with what the other groups are doing. I've kind of kept an eye to see, who's winning. And we're going to talk about all the groups and who's progressing so far to the finals, or to the top cut, I should say, shortly. But really, for me, my concern has been okay, who are we facing this week? Did you guys get your games in? What time are we playing? Who are you facing? What band picks? That's been my major concern. So if there's players out there in other groups that have quit or haven't been able to make it or pulled out or had other issues, I can't speak for that, but I can attest that I think the players that we've placed here faced have all been good sports. Have been pretty good games, even if they're quick and brutal. I think Weiss's games against me were just slaughters. I felt really sick after those games, oh god. But at the same time, he was a good sport about it. It was over and done. There wasn't any taunting. There wasn't any sort of bad manners or here's 10 cards before I finish you off. It's play the game, win, and move on. So yeah. So overall, I think we've had some good representation, at least in our group. So.
I would say Weiss is a lovely player and a lovely person.
Well, that's good.
One of my favorite players. Yeah.
That's a good one, especially for the thing, when you're playing in the World Cup. And I think for the most part, I would hope that the mentality, the sentimentality is the same. You're representing your country, your nation. It's not the Olympics by any means, but technically this is the biggest thing that we have in Horus Heresy Legions. And it is a way for you to, to play with other players outside of your lodge in a big level tournament for probably the biggest tournament format that we've got next to Lodge Wars. And, you don't want to represent it poorly. I don't think there's anybody that's been, that wants to go out and, cause a bad name for their team or for their fellow players, especially, you're not playing it solo. You're playing with two other people, and I don't think that would be fair to your teammates if you're representing both your team and the country that you're supposed to represent poorly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah. So that's what I've got to say about that.
Yeah.
So this last week we had, we faced off against Ireland, Portugal, which I think probably was the one warlord list that was probably the most diverse, I would say, surprising, some of the changes on here. A lot of the warlords we've seen have been pretty consistent. I don't think... Have you really faced a warlord and an opponent so far that has kind of had warlords that you didn't expect to see?
That I didn't expect? I would say this past week versus Portugal Ireland was probably the closest to that. Certainly with the Death Guard pick Mortarion. Mm-hmm. Mortarion specifically within the Death Guard has, I think, public opinion agrees, could have used some love for a while now. And I was surprised to see him, a big stall pick for a tournament setting, so I was a little bit underprepared. But those games, probably of the 3 weeks that we played, similar to your comparison between you and Weiss, that was probably the quickest games that I played so far. So even though I didn't expect it, it was something to quickly adapt to and deconstruct. But no, it's been standard otherwise.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if we broke down the warlord count that we had when we first kicked off the World Cup, but again, it has remained pretty much the same with a couple of changes. The August balance patch did very little to change up the meta. Yep. Like there are still people running Lucius. I know that Zacharias changed his Lucius to a Fulgrim. Or no, actually, I take that back. He's running Fulgrim the whole time. Yeah, so it did nothing for us. And I know there's a couple that maybe put in Core Swain in place of Lucius, but realistically, I think it's been the regular fenders. You've got Sigismund, you've got Korax, you've got Gage and Kroger's, you've got Knights, you've got Sevatar. Like, there's a good collective. Like, who you think would be a good warlord? If there's 12 warlords to choose from, most of the teams are representing. There might be one or two special picks, depending on like that player specific, like special strength, flavor, comfort zone, whatever it is. But I think for the most part, it's been kind of like, you could probably say there's probably about 20 warlords represented out of the 12 picks across all groups. Like, you might have one or two odds, but I really would say it probably wouldn't deviate beyond 20 different warlords.
That's probably accurate, yeah.
Yeah, and I could go back and do the math, and maybe I'd be a little bit bigger for like 1 week or something, but yeah, I feel like that's still not bad. I was hoping that the August balance patch would shake things up a little bit more so, but going into Top Cut, which will kick off probably after folks hear this, at that point we'll have a different vote that'll be held that will determine if we are going to play with cards from the Titan Death expansion, and then that could obviously change. Yeah, that'll change some things up. When we've already been, as Team USA, we've already had some discussions in regards to that, like who do we feel might be some good options to bring? What do we want to keep in mind of? What are the options that we might see? Knowing that we're probably not going to see Titans, I would really be surprised if the majority votes to allow Titans in the World Cup. And even though with one faction per, allowed, like technically that only means 2 Titans are going to be in there, but those 2 Titan games, if it's not Titan versus Titan, that could very well be like, well, that's a win, so it just feels like why even add that in there? Like, let's just ignore that. Let's focus on the other cards that were added in the expansion and still have a good games.
Yeah.
So
you have to play very particularly to counter a Titan, which seems like that happens on ladder in my experience. And to speak a little bit positively about the recent balance patch, it has seen less Lucius on ladder, which I'm grateful for. I thought those games were very boring, but yeah, it hasn't changed the tourney much. Yeah,
and I think that's just, the Emperor's Children still can be pretty flexible, and not everybody was running Lucius. There's like 1 Lucius per team if there was, and I think those have been kind of phased out. Looking at it this week, in our group anyways, in Group B, I don't see a Lucius in here at all. I do see a couple Fulgrims. Nope, yeah, because Spain had the bye, so technically they weren't running Lucius this week. Although Rosa has always run Lucius for a while, so I wouldn't be surprised if he continues with the Lucius again. We'll see. We shall see. So let's take a look at the group standings where we're at currently. We're going to be going into top 8 here after this following week. By the time you guys hear this, like I said, those games will probably be determined. There will be 2 teams advancing from each of the groups. There's 4 groups, and those teams will advance into Group A. And I have no idea how they'll be seeded or who they'll be playing, but we've got a couple of basically teams that are already confirmed, and several teams that are kind of on the border, and we still got a week to go, so some of these rounds are going to be close. I'm going to go through the standings here, and we can kind of just collectively talk about the teams that are on there. So Team Group A, currently, it looks like has not yet been decided as far as who's going to get in there. Currently, Team Finland, Serbia is looking pretty solid. Team Russia is also looking like they could get it, although I think they have one more game. And then Team Canada, if they win their 2 weeks, then technically I think that might come down to a point count if they make it in over Team Russia. So it could come down between Team Russia and Team Canada. And then Team Ukraine and Team Belarus. Yeah, so they're kind of in an interesting spot. Not necessarily a three-way tie, but really where it's like, well, if one scores high and the other one doesn't, then we could have a turnaround. It looks like Team Finland, Serbia, though, as long as they win their week, they should be in there. They'll have 3 wins. Really good. Team Group B, which is the group that we're in, it looks like, and granted, looks can be deceiving, but I think this is where we're looking at right now. Team Italy is going in. They're going to make it to the playoffs. They've
good for them. Good for them.
Yeah, they've played strong. They've played 3 wins so far, no losses. It looks like we will have the win to go into it with Team USA with our 2 wins, mostly because one of our wins was over the Team Netherlands-Romania spot. So even if because they've got 2 wins and 2 losses, we currently have got 2 wins and 1 loss. We still have 1 week to play, but we have a tiebreaker over them. I still want to play it, still want us to win it, obviously, and have 3 wins and go into to the top cut without having to worry about points and tiebreakers and all that stuff. And then Team Spain and Team Ireland, Portugal are kind of at the bottom of the group stage there.
Yeah.
And Group C has got Team Hungary in the playoffs. They have got 3-0 as well. They haven't lost anything. They're going in there, and it looks like there's not been games reported yet for this whole week. So there could be Team UK, it could be Team Georgia, and Team Kazakhstan and Team Argentina, Brazil, Mexico are not going to make it. But again, that second spot may not yet be determined for Group C. So that'll be very interesting to see who will progress. I don't know who's got the bye this coming week. If Team UK has a bye, Team Georgia still hasn't played 2 weeks. So yeah, I think Team UK's already had their games. So if Team Georgia wins 2, then they could get up in there too. And then last but not least, Group D, which is another really vicious bracket. Some solid teams. Team Germany and Team France are advancing for sure. It's already been determined. There's four teams in there. Team Australia loses out. Team Australia will not be in the top cut this year. And Team Czech Republic, Croatia, Poland, the CCP, is that what they are?
CCP, yeah.
CCP? Somebody referred them to that. Like, I'd never heard that. I thought it was like, oh, you down with CCP? Yeah, you know me.
Someone said that, and someone asked. People were asking if that was a Chinese team because people kept calling it CCP, so people stopped calling it.
I think OCP from RoboCop is what I think. Like, even though it's not CCP, it's like OCP.
I mean, it's close.
It's right at 209.
No, I agree.
But yeah, they're out. But they again, that's just a tough. That was a tough group stage. Team Germany and Team France are going to be some powerhouses in the top 8. So we've currently got at least looks like 4 teams of the 8 decided, all but yet confirmed 100%. And then we've obviously got 4 that still have to be yet to be determined. So hopefully this week goes well for Team USA. But going over those teams, and obviously I haven't mentioned the roster at all, but just the teams themselves. Were there any surprises there for you guys?
I'm no offense to Creed. I'm surprised Finland's going as strong with his choices. I love Creed to death. I'm going to make fun of him in each one of these. Simple as. Besides that, shit, man. Team Hungary is going strong. I expected it. They got 2 really good players that I know of. Germany has a bunch of strong people, so I'm not surprised they're 3 wins in. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of surprised Czech Republic lost all 3.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming.
They lost all 3, but again, I mean, they lost all 3 against 4 or 3 other really good teams,
True.
Every week was literally just like Team Germany, Team France, Team Australia. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, they kind of got screwed.
Yeah.
Each week there can only be one.
That's it. Every week there can only be one. And you just got to focus on the week that you're playing. I know when we were talking, when the bracket kicked off for us, it was like, yeah, our big competition is going to be Italy and Netherlands, Romania, and we've got to win against at least one of them. And we lost against Italy in our first week, unfortunately. And then week 2 came out ahead over Netherlands, Romania. So having that win over them was a good spot. And obviously, if we go into the tiebreaker, that might be an important thing. But yeah, having that win over them makes it easier than like, okay, we can win over Ireland, Portugal, which we did. Let's win over Spain. But yeah, like you've got to look at who. Any week, anything can happen. It's a tournament.
Mm-hmm. As far as answering your question there from my own perspective, prior to this, I hadn't ever participated in the World Cup. Despite being a longtime player, I'm not especially active in the main Horse Heresy public Discord, so I wasn't overly familiar with who represented what countries until the brackets were announced. Once the brackets were announced, I think that, certainly that Group D was going to be the toughest from my first opinions, and there were some grudge matches, certainly, maybe not grudge matches, but tough matches to be had in the other groups as well. But so far, I'm not overly shocked, I should say, just based on each player's own reputation as far as me having faced them on the ladder. If they're some of the more long-standing or high-ranking players, it's all checked out pretty much.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think every team has got some names that are familiar or that are like, but I mean, they can't all be top. Otherwise, everybody be in the top 8. But there are some teams that are just a little bit more stronger, a little bit more intimidating, or not surprising at the very least when they clean house. So
yeah, when I saw Germany up there, I just went, all right.
I just wanted to add, I think the biggest determining factor that I've seen when looking at the brackets for other groups and who won, besides, of course, the skill of all players, is since it is random matchups, which I appreciate and I thought was a good decision. I think that depending on whose warlord choices get paired up, that's a big determining factor, because whether everyone's aiming to be as generally applicable as they can. That way, there's good matchups between their 4 warlords for any play style of their opponents. I think that there have been several cases, and I can't name them offhand, but several cases where, if only you had been matched up against another player or any other player, even from that country, you might have fared better.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that we didn't cover. When the tournament started off, and this is actually something that changed, I think, after the first week. When the tournament first kicked off, basically the order that you submitted your list in, like, so if I listed Team USA's listing for Scuffy and then Zacharias and then Virgil, and I submitted in that order, then I'm in spot 1, Zacharias is in spot 2, and Virgil's in spot 3, and then that means that we would match up with the corresponding teams spot 1, spot 2, spot 3, and then there would be some weeks where we could shuffle that around and change that. A lot of people, the majority enough where it was voted on, wanted that to be just random and have the TOs make that determination random, not have it be penalized for putting it in the wrong order, or for somebody could say, well, you know what? Every week it's been, Scuffy in spot 1. Let's throw somebody who can match his warlords with a spot 1. They don't change up, then we're good to go. Instead, we just have random pairings, and then you don't have to worry about that until you get your list and say, okay, this is who we're facing. You can then, if you need to, like we talked about, you can make some changes to your list based off of what you've got and maybe try to make a smart band choice, but you're not feeling like right out the gate they're looking ahead and being able to say, okay, this is who's playing, this is who we're playing, this is what they're playing. Pick these warlords, or put these cards in your deck, or whatever it is. You'll be really good against this player, and this player here is going to be a hard match for you. That's still a possibility, but it's not something that you can plan on, and I do appreciate that as well.
Likewise. Yeah. I think a tournament should be, especially in a group setting, less about preparing for who as an individual you're going to face, and more about being ready to face more play styles, more players at their skill level. Of course, once you know who you're facing, it's a big part to add in who's the person I'm playing, and if you have that familiarity, how do they play, how are they more likely to build their decks. But I think the first focus should be that it's random, so you have to be ready for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you shouldn't be able to pick your warlord choices. Well, not exactly pick them, but plan ahead knowing I'm going to face this guy. He likes to play these things. This is how I'm doing it.
Right. Yeah, and I think too. I mean, to be fair, I think there's already a lot of elements of planning involved with regards to warlord selection being an option to change every week, ban lists being something that you then have to make a follow-up choice after that. If there's less choices that we have to make and we can just focus on playing the game and focus on trying to, to make the best with what our matchup is that week, I think that's, that's really what, like I said, like that's what the tournament should be boiled down to. Less about, okay, let's strategize who's playing who, and like it may be fun for some folks, but that's outside of the game. Ultimately, the game focus should be on the game itself.
Yeah,
exactly.
So with the brackets going into top 8, again, not quite sure as far as what we're going to, who's all going to be there. Hopefully Team USA makes that cut and we get up in there. And I know we've already had a little bit of chat discussion on this with top 8, but are there any, looking at the couple teams that have already gone ahead or that are already progressing and the ones that are looking like they're going to progress, are there any matchups that you're kind of curious to see or that you're looking forward to maybe getting paired up with, right? Because I think once we get into that top 8, it's going to be single elimination. Single
elimination based on the players, really, or it's going to be countries?
Well, it'll be based on the country. So, yeah, best 2 out of 3, but if the team loses, they're out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. From what I'm seeing it, I think Team Germany and Team France will be an interesting match because they both come out swinging with really good players, so I'm excited for that one, just to see the results and like the replays. Replays are fun, by the way, folks, in case you want to watch them on the channels they're uploaded on. That's it. I mean, Hungary's made it through. I guess they'll likely be up against Team UK.
Well, I don't know if they will, like, because they're already in the groups with those teams, right? Like,
yeah.
Granted, I don't know if how they're going to be seated. Like, I would hope.
They're not facing the same group.
Right. I would hope for diversity's sake, like basically Group A, pick 1 is squared up against Group D, pick 1, and Group B, pick 1 is squared up against Group C, pick 1, and so on and so forth. So that way, there's less opportunity to play guys you've already played.
Yeah. Then in that regard, yeah, the teams have already pushed through. So like, let's say Italy, Finland, Hungary. You guys are 2-1. There's a lot of teams that have pretty much already pushed through, and I'm kind of excited because they're all packing really good players.
Yeah,
like, I'd like to see the results of Hungary and Germany if they end up together. Those are 2 stacked teams.
That's some stacked teams all over, but I think, I'm curious to see. Obviously, if it's, I'm honestly really curious to see how Finland Serbia is going. I want to see how they progress. I Alex and Bria and Creed, like those are longtime player guys, good players, and kind of an eclectic mix, so to speak. And I'd like to see how they progress if they are squared up against. I don't know if they're squared up against Italy, if they're squared up against France, if they're squared up against who else? Germany or Hungary. Like, I mean, I'm kind of curious to see how those games go.
I'm excited. Simply because of Creed's warlord choices. Like, Alex is really good Seal main. Anyone who knows the viability of Seal knows of Alex. Simple as. But man, Creed came out swinging with the dumbest warlords, and I love him for it.
Well, I mean, as his, like, just take a look at his record, for Creed's record currently, the last few weeks. Like, let's see, there's 1 week there, there's 2 weeks here, there's 3 weeks here. Yeah, they had a bye, so I mean, he had some really crazy warlord selections. He also hasn't won any games with them, so
true.
I mean, granted he could have won this week, but it's kind of interesting to see. Like, I mean, you've got 2 other players that are really like have played through. Now that doesn't mean that anything wrong on Creed. Maybe he'll make some different choices going into the top 8 or not. Who's to say?
We won't know until it happens. I'm holding out hope that Creed comes out swinging with some bullshit.
You're gonna hope that he just memes all the way through?
I'm hoping he memes into a straight victory. That would be the highlight of World Cup. I'm putting it out there now, folks.
That could be entertaining. It could be entertaining. It could make for some hair pulling. Sometimes you cannot, properly deck tech against meme material.
Yeah, because you can't predict every meme.
Yeah. It's like, what is this? What are you doing? Why?
My deck is a counter aggro, and I don't even know what to call your deck.
Right. Well, to that
Those
end,
are the best cards.
has there been any matchups that surprised you so far? Like where like they, surprise plays or surprise card selections, or has it really kind of been, I expected they had this card. It just, depending on what turn they would play it.
No, once again, I felt like the matchups and the plays have been maybe not standard or entirely predictable, but not surprising. It's a tournament of mostly long-standing players, so I think they have a good idea of what works and what doesn't, what's the most likely win, especially given the warlords that you're facing. I think, at least in my experience, and I apologize if it's been so standard and not much to talk about, it's been what I might have expected in the days leading up to each matchup, just thinking about different scenarios. There was one, I think, of course, versus Portugal, Ireland, where each warlord that my opponent had picked had several different types of builds that they could easily tech into. And basing my predictions off of ladder, I was always preparing for the worst. And none of those techs were what I saw. They were more specific based off that player's experiences or expectations for what I was going to play. And so that was probably my biggest surprise about what cards they played or when to play.
All right.
I was just going to say, so the type of match where they plan to counter a warlord based on a playstyle simply because of the warlord.
Something like that, it must have been.
Yeah. Those can be fun, where it's like, oh, you think I'm running this archetype, but I'm not at all.
Yeah.
Like, surprise.
You were going to say something, Josh.
Well, I was going to say, with this being your first big tournament, and I know, I don't know if you remember, we played in the qualifiers for Team USA in the World Cup 1. And that was, I think, the first time I ran into you as a player. So, like, I know you've played or tried to play in the qualifiers, and again, we don't know if you can recall any experience from Lodge Wars. But with this being now we're 4 weeks into it, and obviously going through the qualifiers themselves, has this met your expectations? Would you play more of these types of tournaments?
This early on, so given my experience with the Grain of Salt thus far, but this early on, yes, I think it's been fun. Been a good way to get more involved with the community, especially since I don't particularly like to get involved with overly large discords myself, so the main chat and talking with other clans hasn't been something that I've done, but really getting to speak to different players that I may have seen on ladder or maybe even haven't on a couple of cases has been fun. Like you were talking about earlier, kind of trying to serve to represent the US and our player base in whatever way I can has been an honor and a privilege, I'll say, not to trump it up too high, but I hope I'm doing well, both in etiquette and in results to represent the U.S. From what I understand, the U.S. Is not very, very highly regarded within the Warhammer community at large, whether that's tabletop or card games, virtual, etc., because we're newer to it. Europe is always the favorite, but it's, I would do it again, and it's been a good time so far.
All right. Well, that's good. Yeah, and I think, collectively, I think the U.S., I don't want to say we're like the stepchildren, but yeah, like you said, like Warhammer it's a Europe thing. It's a European thing. Like we merely adapted to it. They born and bred it over there, and they've been gracious enough to let us enjoy it. So it is nice to bring some representation there and actually play and progress. And obviously, other countries are in the same caliber. I mean, we've got some South American countries that have played in the World Cup. No Africa countries, and sadly, this tournament, I don't think any of the East Asian countries were notified or aware of the World Cup at all. So even though we've seen some more of those players and lodges kind of grow the last year or so, none of those teams are represented. But I mean, there's a good spread from Europe to North America and South America. So it's been kind of, good to see other players get in there, and some do as well as expected and some do better than anticipated. So, yeah.
I remember, too, though, a lot of them are not in the Discord for Eastern Asian countries, so they would not have heard of it because I don't think the in-game announcement was much.
Sadly.
If it even happened.
No, the in-game announcement never did happen, and that's really unfortunate because that's, like,
It was asked for, and they said it would happen.
Yeah,
or at
it
least I
was
could have
multiple times, and I think they actually delayed the qualifiers and the kickoff for about a month and a half, because we were waiting on that announcement, and it just never happened. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if EG
I'm not going to name names
decided not to, or they forgot about it, or they didn't think it was a big deal. But you know what? When people start seeing that Blood Games 3 card back, and they're wondering why they didn't get a chance to play for it, well,
it's going to confuse players.
It's going to confuse some players. That's all I'm going to say.
I think any misgivings or confusion aside, it is a motivator and a silver lining to get any players that hear this or otherwise to try and join the main Discord and the tournament Discord, because even if you're like me and you don't typically participate in things like that, it helps to get notifications for the game and the community that are widely applicable, like this tournament.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah, and just having,
you don't even have to type.
You just have to get the notification and come across it and, check in, register, and then that's about it. And then obviously, depending on how far it goes or progresses, then you get a little bit more involved there. But not knowing or not being, dialed into the community to find out about it, yeah, it's a little missed opportunity. And hopefully, it will be something that I don't know what the next big series. I guess we'll probably have Lodge Wars 6 at some point at the end of this year or the start of next year. So hopefully by that point, maybe we won't be duplicating the mistake, and we'll see some new lodges in the Lodge Wars.
That'd be fun.
Here's hoping.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you guys have any other thoughts currently on where we're looking at with the World Cup?
Excited to see the results of the matches coming. Besides that, not much to say. We're kind of at a halfway point. We're halfway through the first stage, but not really at the next one.
Right.
So I can't say much.
Well, okay. This is a loaded question, but Virgil, top 3 picks, first, second, third. Who do you think is going to go all the way?
Of course, and this doesn't surprise anybody, I'm sure, but I think Germany and France will make it very far, if not, amongst the top 3. There's always room for surprises in my book. I'd like to stay optimistic and hope that we can, as a team, as the U.S., get into the top 3. I'd love to see at least a card back, whether that's bronze, silver, or even gold for our participation and our efforts here. But yeah, I'd probably have to say safely Germany and France in the top 3. And anywhere else is not up for grabs, but based on the players and the RNG of who you're facing is maybe still to be determined. We're pretty early.
Okay.
For the RNG gods.
Well, I believe, if it helps, I could be wrong, but I had this conversation with Terse a couple days ago, who's the tournament organizer. In the last 2 World Cups, top 8 has gotten card back. First place gets a gold, second and third will get silver, and then the remainder of top 8 will get the bronze. I believe that will continue to be the case for this World Cup. So if we make it to top 8, we should see a card back, regardless of where we place. It just will determine, are we going to get, gold, silver, or bronze?
Yeah.
Be nice.
So that would be nice. I agree. It's always nice, especially when, this is the first we really talked about World Cup in the last, 3-4 weeks since it kicked off. But we've been dealing with World Cup for about 2 months now. With the qualifiers, we're in July. This is the tail end of August. And if we go into it next, into the top 8, then that's probably at least a week or 2 of, I would imagine, 2 weeks in September. Maybe even 3, I guess, depending on time zone scheduling and issues there. So that's a long time. And I know when we had the World Cup teams on last year was a little different. Instead of 4 groups or 5 groups of 4 or 5, there was just 2 really big groups, and they played for 6 or 7 weeks. They played for a long time before they even got to the top 8 position.
Oh.
So, but again, it's like a 3-month journey through the World Cup. So it's not just something that happened overnight or on the weekend. Hey, we played the World Cup yesterday. It's been a long journey, and we're not done yet. So yeah. I guess what I'm saying there is it'll have been a marathon, and it just is. This is the only time we're talking about it, and hopefully next week when we talk with team, I think we're talking with Team Serbia and Finland actually, and then the week after that we're talking with Team Netherlands Romania. So that'll be 3 weeks there, and hopefully by that point, people will kind of be like, oh, that's right, the World Cup is still going on. Because it should still be going on.
Hopefully. Unless something has ended it early.
Well,
I don't
let's
know what
hope
could,
nothing ends
but
early. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could just get those games done really fast.
yeah, assuming everyone can queue up their games within hours of each other in this hypothetical super scenario, then maybe.
Our time zones, man, I'll tell you, those 8-hour, 9-hour differences are just brutal.
They're killer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Killer.
Well, when you're not playing World Cup, when you're not playing Legions, what is it that you do?
Well, as far as hobbies, I am a gamer, and you've already known that I'm into tabletop, though I'll be honest, my models have been gathering dust for the past edition and a half. I've been displeased with Games Workshop and how often they want to edit the rules and the codexes for balancing. I think that's really not conducive to a tabletop game. So I haven't been playing as much as I'd like to, but of course painting and just reading a lot of those books. Outside of Warhammer, though, I do a lot of online games. I do Destiny probably primarily, Destiny 2 that is, and a lot of Elden Ring recently because I'm a big fan of the Souls games. Outside of gaming, I'm pretty big into hiking. I'm based out of the Pacific Northwest for those of you that are familiar with the United States, and of course there's endless mountains and river gorges and waterfalls to hike out here, which is probably my favorite thing to do in life. When I'm not working or doing any of the previously mentioned activities, also into gardening and reading science fiction, fantasy.
It's fun.
All right, that's a good cosmopolitan of hobbies and activities. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What would you say is your favorite edition for the tabletop?
Of the three that I've experienced, I would have to, of course, be biased and say 7th. That was the first edition that I got into. I think that the rules, while more complicated, certainly, than 8th and 9th, they felt more representative of the intensity and the amount of consideration that should be taken for what very frequently is a 4 or 5 hour game when you're bringing 2K or more points. And I really appreciated the forethought you had to put into your lists. It gave me a good connection to each of them, the lists specifically, let alone my army. And that was my favorite edition thus far. There weren't as many Primarchs at the time. It was just Magnus, so it was kind of like if you're that guy, you'll bring Magnus. But otherwise, there's no big models that you're really afraid to see on the tabletop. I did like 8th edition. I thought that while that is where we really started to see Games Workshop editing their own rules too many times and in too many different venues, that it was a good way for players to get into the game. It was less complicated, and that was their goal. It was a little bit easier to understand. The transition of turns and terminology was not dumbed down, but made easier to interpret from an outside perspective. I got a couple of friends into the tabletop scene during that edition, so that was also very good. 9th edition, I haven't played at all, and from my experience, just still being a member of different communities for the tabletop game, it's not been the best. There are codexes that have been missing for a long time, and those codexes that have gone out have seen so many iterations with release of models and then release of other armies models in order to do balancing, that it's just been a bit of a mess. And I do hope that they... Oh, sorry. Do go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the biggest problem with 9th is it's not, done yet. So everyone's like, wow, I can't wait to play 9th, but they half-assed its launch. It came out so early after 8th. Oh. Yeah. If you like 7th... Oh, sorry, Scuff.
Well, I was going to say, the last edition I played was 7th, and I agree. I mean, I didn't play 8th or 9th. I know 7th. That's when they kind of went back to kind of a different structure with regards to the strength tables and getting away with the to hit and to wound tables. But
yeah, if you like 7s, try HHL. Not HHL, HH.
Right.
1.0
exactly.
It's better 7s.
Yeah.
I have been meaning to get into it, especially since having gotten into it in 7th edition, a lot of my models are firstborn, so even though the armor, the marks of the armor and some of the weapons wouldn't be... Yeah, most people at the GWs are pretty cool about that sort of thing.
Oh man, I can't go to a game shop because I'm just going to be laughed at. No one cares. I've played games where it's like, hey man, I don't got this model on me right now. Can I use a bottle cap?
And
we'll just know what we're talking
unless it's like I played in maybe 2 tournaments where it was like little like WYSIWYG tournaments, like what you see is what you get.
Where they like weigh your models?
Yeah. Like otherwise it was like, all right, cool, your arm is unpainted. Or he doesn't have a plasma pistol in his hand. Actually, he's actually got 2-handed close combo weapon. Like, okay, like as long as I know what he's got, like you just play with it. Like that's the whole thing. When you're going to the big tournaments, I get it, obviously. And then you have to deal with older editions where people would like, oh, I modeled him so that he's actually like 2 inches above the base, so he's got line of sight and all that stupid
that
crap.
was sometimes a pain.
I mean, that when you get
It's
to
still a
technicalities,
fun thing
like,
to consider.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And somebody goes that way to like bend the rules, like, really? Like, well, I mean,
don't be that guy. People at home, don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
But realistically,
that is not
like,
someone you want to play.
Most people just want to play the game. You know, if you got the models, good for you.
Yeah.
I had one year, my friend, a whole year, for whatever reason, like he just didn't build his army. So like he had 3 units that were literally just Necron feet on bases. That's it.
That's a hustle.
Just the
I
legs.
respect that.
But I mean, thematically, he could kind of like stretch it. He's like, well, you know, they're under reanimation protocols. I'm like, that's a stretch, but I'll allow it. You know, like it worked technically, but it's like, come on, dude, put your.
That's funny enough. Where if I played against a guy who is just feet, I would laugh. I'm cool with that. No, that's hilarious to me.
Yeah,
just run them as scarabs. It's
there you
all right.
go. Yeah,
there's ways around it. But yeah, I would totally recommend HH 2.0 because it's just more 7th edition.
How has the 2.0 been? I have to ask for those of you that have played HH.
It's nerfed a lot of things that didn't really need nerfs, but besides a couple things where it's like you guys didn't need to nerf Night Lords that much, it's fine. Dark Angels are strong right now. Ultramarines are strong. Alpha Legion has some fun rules. In case the new Alpha Legion rules, well, kind of new. They count as further away on the table whenever you go to attack them. And also, once a game, when you attack them, they can just teleport their entire squad 12 inches away because you shot at decoys.
One squad?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fun.
Now,
they have a bunch of fun stuff.
Is there one book for the Horus Heresy?
There's 3 books.
So it's still the same 3 books, or are these new prints of the books?
These are new prints of the books that put together the traitor factions, the loyalist factions, and then the base rules.
Okay.
So really, you only need 2 books if you want to play.
Right.
You need
the
traitor book or the loyalist book.
And then which one ever that you're playing, right?
Yeah, and then the books are also really nice because they're these beautiful. Let's be real here. GW's HH books always come out nice. They're like these hardcover, beautiful pages. Big art spreads of what each faction looks like and how you should paint them if you want to be on the nail of accurate. I don't do that. My Alpha Legion are a darker shade of blue. Do I care? No, they look good, right?
Last but not least, does the box, because I have yet to find the box and or squirrel away the money to pick up the box, but does the box come with the rule book?
It comes with the first one, yes.
Oh, that's all you need, baby.
I can pull up a list of everything it comes with if you are interested.
Do it. Send me that list. Because I'm, you know what? Like I'm still waiting on my my income tax return.
I'm going to be honest.
But when I get it,
I bought it and I looked at the list.
Still waiting in October or August.
I filed by paper. I made the mistake of doing that, and apparently they're like months behind. I don't know.
I'm in Canada. I filed by paper. It took me a week to get it.
I filed by paper the last 2 years, and I would have them by July. And this year they're still working on 2020 tax returns, so it's not been fun. Not that I desperately need it, but it's like, that would be a nice.
It's nice to have your money back.
Yeah. Because if I didn't pay, if I owed, they'd be hounding me down. Like I'd be.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you would be.
I'd be behind bars right now. Like.
All right. I think I have a list right here. Let me just make sure. Okay, so it comes with the new rulebook. It comes with 54 miniatures, which includes 40 tactical marines, 10 terminators, a sword praetor, an axe praetor, a dreadnought, and a Spartan assault tank.
Yep.
It comes with 2 reference sheets, so you know what all your stuff does and all their weapons. 20 six-sided die and 1 scattered die. 3 weapon templates. 2 like the little grenades and stuff.
another thing I've missed from
measure
7th edition.
I
The
agree.
flamer and
The
the
templates.
explosion templates. Yeah.
They're back.
Like, I know that, like, sometimes they were a point of contention, like, well, it's only partially, it's under the template. It's like, but, like, that was part of it. Like, the scatter die, like, there was always that chance. Like, the flamer template, just laying that flamer template over, like, yeah, I'm going to,
Feels so cool.
boom, those 6
Like,
guys fried.
There's nothing better than dropping a fireball radius on a table.
I love
whatever.
For that reason, because I like flamer templates so much, when I did my Imperial Guard army, I was like, how many Hellhounds can I get? Give me all the Hellhounds.
That's perfect.
Yes.
Oh, and you'll like this stuff. It also comes with a transfer sheet for the Imperial Fist and the Sons of Horus, so you can just use all the Imperial Fist ones.
That's right.
It comes with a.
I'm not going to feel
instruction.
bad about running Imperial Fist in the Horus Heresy. Like, that's just
They're good. They're actually really good right now because they're all
Yes.
about shooting, and they're good.
as they should be. As they should be.
All the rules also feel extremely thematic. Like Word Bearers, their morale stays almost perfect the entire game because they're so loyal.
They're so devoted, right?
Death Guard, they count as standing still even when they're walking when it comes to shooting
Okay.
because
That makes
they're
sense.
in
Slow and
advance.
steady.
Yep.
Yeah, slow and steady. They can also move through difficult terrain as if it was nothing because slow and steady.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the rules are really thematic. I like 2.0 so far. It could definitely use some tweaking, but as long as that's in like eras that aren't that bad to get a hold of, I'll be fine with that.
Well,
I honestly think this box is one of the best deals they've done in forever.
and the big thing about it, like you kind of mentioned with the codexes in 40K, is like every 2-3 months, like, here's a new codex with some more models. Like,
It came out with all of them.
yeah, here's the book, here's everything. It's in these 2 books. If they're going to make a couple
only
things, they'll
thing
make a
that's
couple
missing
tweaks. Like, that's the way it should be. Like,
Yeah, the
I
only thing we're
enjoyed
missing
that.
is Solar Expo.
Yeah, I enjoyed that when I first started playing in 3rd edition, and my friend was like, here's the rule book. And like, he's like, granted, everything at this point, because it was like the tail end of 3rd edition, he's like, 90% of the units that are in here are totally different in the codexes. But when the game came out, you had the rule book, and you had basically army lists for like 6 different armies. Like, oh, this is what a dreadnought is. And then I get the codex, I'm like, wow, dreadnoughts are a lot cheaper now, and they're better. That makes sense. Like, but if you don't have to worry about that, because you just have loyalist traders, that's the way to go.
I honestly really like 2.0 because if you wanted to play 1.0, you had to own like 9 books because your faction would have been introduced in book 3, but in book 6 they got a rework, and then in book 8 they got a tweak, and I don't like that.
Yeah,
I really don't like that.
That's too much, especially when some of those books are hardcover that are running like $50-$70 a pop.
Oh, even more for 1.0. Some of them were pushing 100 in some cases.
What?
These books, because they would have been really old and hard to get a hand. Like the first and the second, waves of books were really hard to get at points.
Well,
The
I mean, I
base
think
book
this one
in
has been
American,
better
$60.
distributed. So
Yeah, I mean, $300 sounds like a lot, but you're getting you're getting 2 armies worth, the rule book, transfer sheets. Honestly, I think it's for once GW doing a good deal for players. It's not like their $200 9th edition boxes where you get 20 models.
mm-hmm.
Honestly, blows me away with the 9th edition prices.
Yeah.
Oh, and they're all plastic.
Yeah.
You don't have to deal with resin. God bless. Resin looks good.
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful. Holy
But
shit,
it's
is resin
fragile.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Did
not only is fragile.
Did you guys ever get?
sorry.
Did you ever get the fine cast models when they're like, "Ooh, Citadel fine cast"? Did you ever get
I
those?
know people with them. I don't have them.
Well, when our shop was in Las Vegas, that's where I
Yeah.
was. So they would regularly get for months, the whole duration of the fine cast, because of the shipping and because it was going through the desert. They would regularly get like half their shipment warped or melted or bent by the heat. By the time they even pulled it out, they couldn't even put it on the shelf. And it was like,
Oh man,
and that was a regular thing. It's like, yeah, we knew that was going to be a problem because it was the material that they're using. Like, I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. Nobody wanted that. And like, then not to mention, then you'd have like the little bubbles because the mold wasn't good, or the little pieces would just snap off as opposed, like, it just the worst model decision that GW made for quite a long time. And now it's all pricing decisions, but I mean, that was like, what were they thinking?
yeah, and it also plastic nice to work with too. Resin is a bitch to clean.
Yeah.
Like with plastic, I get my mold line remover, I get my little pliers. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, for big models, the mold line, it doesn't even need to be removed. but you get to resin, and you're like, man, I really want this hand to look good. I'm going to spend the next 4 hours doing a little trimming because it was covered in too much resin.
And don't make a mistake. Don't snip too hard.
Oh, no, because it's hard to glue resin together.
Yep.
So normal plastic glue will cut it, but not as well as you'd want.
Not as well at all.
Which, it's a shame.
Well, Axel, what have you been up to when you're not playing Legions?
Well, a new D&D rulebook came out, so I'm prepping a session for that. Spelljammers, we're going to space. Besides that, for the D&D nerds at home, 5.5/6E got announced. For those unaware, they're getting rid of editions in total, is what they're saying. There'll be no more editions. They're releasing one system, they'll just constantly update. Will this actually happen? I doubt it. I refuse to believe they're going to do that. It reworks everything of combat. Crits don't happen for the DM anymore. He can't crit. Crits don't apply to sneak attack or divine smite anymore. Critical successes and nat fails are now in the rules. We can no longer optional them unless, homebrew it. I always do anyways. It's a bunch of weird shit, and I don't know how I feel about it, but it's also 2 years away, and if anyone remembers D&D Next, Scuff, you were around for that. You probably remember that.
Was that during the 4th edition? Yeah,
was like...
When 4th came out, I was on a massive hiatus because I was like, no, thanks.
Yeah, no, 4th kind of ruined everything for everyone because it was so hot garbage.
Yeah.
So, in preparation, they released D&D Next, which was like the prep test for, D&D 5e. And it was a completely different game. All fighters had battle maneuvers. It was honestly really cool, and they removed a lot of it. So I'm thinking the game's might be good in 2 years.
Well, I'll tell you this. You can tell me that the DM isn't going to crit, but at my table...
I'm still going to crit.
There's going to be crits.
I'm going to tell... there's going to be... They would have to do something crazy to not let me have crits.
Yeah.
Like, they're either have to increase damage across the line, because my goblin dealing 1d4, he's going to really need a crit. Like, when I get a crit, I'm like, that's good. It's only a 2d4. Mm-hmm. My players aren't really going to complain, and it puts a little threat on the table. I don't know why I'm not allowed to crit anymore. They got to make, up the damage by at least, a 2 for every die, or something stupid. Right?
I mean, you could always just go back and play 1st or 2nd edition. I mean,
I don't want to deal with Thaco.
Listen, Thaco is the best.
I refuse to deal with Thaco.
2-hit armor class 0. I live by that. I live by Thaco.
I kill because it exists. Okay, I'm the exact opposite.
It's the best.
It is quite possibly the worst thing to ever come out of D&D, and I'm gonna die on this hill.
I had the math down. I had it figured out. Now, granted, I don't disagree. I think the D20 system in 3rd edition just made sense. It was like, wow, why didn't they do this sooner? But when it came to as far as adding some level of difficulty and you're not a superhero. You're just a person with a sword or a staff or a bow and arrow in this world of make-believe and monsters, and you have to use a little bit more than just your inner powers. That's, for me, that was always part of the element. So I'd like for them to do that, but if they're going to be like, no, everybody's a superhero and the DM is not, then I'll be like, you know what? There's other games. There's other editions I can play.
That's why whenever my players ask for flanking rolls, I always put the hard caveat. You guys realize I'm getting this too, and I'm making horde encounters now.
Yeah, I tell them.
The minute you're allowed flanking, I'm like, man, there's more goblins. Isn't that a shame?
That's crazy. How did that happen? You guys are totally flanked. What?
Everyone's flanked right now. How does that feel? And the casters in the back who don't see the goblins moving through the shadows, they're going to regret that soon. If only there was no flanking.
Well, is there anything you'd like to plug, Virgil?
To plug? Not necessarily. I'm not a creator myself, though I would like to be in some venue or another that I won't expand upon. But no plugs in particular. Just if you're not a member of any of the main discords for Horse Heresy Leagues, think about it. Once again, I advertise that I am not a big, huge Discord kind of guy. I like smaller communities, but it's still good. It has other benefits to be a part of. You see what the card backs are going to look like for top 50. You see different tournaments, large and small. It's a good way to get cards for new players or for other free-to-play players like myself when you participate in these tournaments. And it doesn't cost you tickets, which is a big thing. So yeah, that would be the only thing, if anything, is think about joining the Discords and have fun out there.
All right.
Yeah.
How about you, Axel? Any plugs?
You know what? I'm going to have to plug my boy. Dorn. Does beautiful art. He did my beautiful crab and my beautiful crab bearer. Truly Clark on Instagram. Great guy. I was looking for some players for my D&D group, and half of them hit me with that's a good crab. So, you know what? Dorn, you're going to hear that? You did a good crab.
That's a good crab.
That's a good crab.
Is it? Did they say it, though, like the guy from Babe? Like, that'll do, crab. That'll do.
No, they didn't, but it would have been 10 times better if they did.
That's the next evolution. We'll get to that point eventually. Well, I'm going to plug deck slots, and hopefully when we get the September balance patch, we're actually going to have some deck slots. We'll see. But in the meantime, if you haven't already checked it out, you should check out the album of the year, Horus Heresy Legions, straight out of deck slots. It's streaming constantly on the YouTube channel. Over 200 views. Wow. Who can believe it? I mean, given the fact that I typically my videos get like 300 views, if I'm lucky, I'll take 200 views if people sat through and listened to that fun, amateurish, jokey jokes, some parodies, some fun stuff, some things if you don't mind stomaching Tone Deaf Scuffy for 45 minutes. But outside of that, we had Barnet Legions last night for August. Had a turnout of 10 players. That was really fun. So we're looking to probably find a good time to do it again in September and hopefully get the same or more participants. Had some new players in there, had some returning players. I think the last time we had Barnet Legions was back in May. It's just been a crazy summer, and it was kind of a nice night to kind of feel a little bit better getting over the COVID and sitting down and chatting, playing some casual games, and it was fun stuff. So playing that, and for those of you, by the time you hear this, the deadline for the Place Your Bets contest will have ended, so your opportunity to have participated in that will have ended. However, winners will not be announced until the World Cup concludes. So if you have submitted, and I think I've got about 9 entries now, if you have submitted for that contest, pay attention to the World Cup, follow along, cheer on the teams, and when it's all over, said and done, the top 3 players who submitted their bets basically will get 1,000 gold. So there's some free gold to be had. And then I got to figure out some ways to give away gold in September and October as well. I don't know if we're going to do some Steam streams. We'll do something. Maybe we'll just do something on the on Twitch. I don't know. I'm still figuring things out. I'm still getting over COVID. I'm still getting over the summer. But come September, we'll have some stuff. I got to do that deck list contest too. I got to bring that back. I've been
those were fun.
Those are fun, and you get some good variety. I got to come up with some good themes. I'm tempted. I don't want to repeat stuff, but I'm tempted to go way back to the very first few, because we've had so many new cards and factions added since those contests kicked off, and maybe get some new takes from people. So we'll see. But that's a way to give away promo codes. Give away some gold. Why not? Yeah. All right. Well, that's it, guys. Virgil, thanks for taking your time. Thanks for joining us. Team USA, 2 out of 3 players were here talking about the World Cup next week. Like I said, we're going to be having the Team Finland-Serbia guys joining us, hopefully talking about their experience in a different group. They're in Group A. No, yeah, they're in Group A. So it'll be kind of interesting to hear what their take is on their experience and everything. And we'll see. We'll see how the World Cup progresses.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. That's it. Bye.
Fun. Bye.
Thank you for having me, and have a good night, you guys.
It ends here.
This has been another episode of the Warp Chatter Podcast. Thank you for listening.
I can't help but appreciate your talents.
It was inspiring.
I need some wood.